Welcome, and thank you for coming tonight to celebrate the 6th annual Waterston Desert Writing Prize. I'm Dana Whitelaw, Executive Director of the High Desert Museum. We are so pleased you could join us in the virtual world this year. Celebrating the Waterston Desert Writing Prize speaks to the core of the museum's mission, to bring awareness to the wonder of the desert landscape. For some of the museum's audience, the arts, the literary arts in particular, are the avenue of choice for exploring, learning about, and appreciating the desert landscape. The museum is dedicated to creating dialogue and conversation, and literature is a rich starting point for this endeavor. One of the components that I've loved about the prize is how our writers have expanded the borders of how we think about deserts and highlight deserts in a very broad sense. Honoring individuals for their literary contributions extends our impact and brings awareness to the broad scope of the work taking place at the High Desert Museum and at Playa at Summer Lake, the Artisan Summer Residency Camp, as well as bringing attention to the unique role of deserts in our world. The prize, proudly, is in its 6th year, and the High Desert Museum has been a very proud partner since it began. And tonight we have an incredibly exciting announcement. This year, the High Desert Museum will formally adopt the Waterston Desert Writing Prize and continue its mission, its vision, and its legacy in perpetuity. It is an incredible honor for the museum, and we look forward to the evolution and growth of this literary award. On behalf of the board of the High Desert Museum, I'm very grateful for the board of the Waterston Desert Writing Prize for their thoughtful stewardship and giving the museum the opportunity to continue its important impact. This promises to be a lovely evening delving into desert writing. And to get us started, it is my great pleasure to welcome award-winning author and poet and founder of the Waterston Desert Writing Prize, a cultural advocate in many realms, Ellen Waterston, to continue our program this evening.
Welcome to virtually everyone. And welcome to the 6th annual Waterston Desert Writing Prize award ceremony. And thank you, Dana Whitelaw, so much. And also thank you, Becca Berta and Heidi Hagerman, for all your assistance getting this show on the screen. We are gathered to recognize and celebrate the winners of this year's Writing Prize, including the first ever Student Essay Prize winner, and also to break a bottle of champagne across the bow of the recently announced adoption of the prize by the High Desert Museum. The High Desert Museum and the Waterston Desert Writing Prize boards, along with the Oregon Community Foundation that administers the endowment that partially funds the prize, came together to approve the transfer of the prize to the museum. That negotiation concluded this month. Thanks to all concerned. The future's so bright for the prize, I gotta wear shades. Why the transfer? For those of us on the Waterston Desert Writing Prize board, it is legacy planning. The prize's growth potential is best realized in partnership with the museum. As a program of the High Desert Museum, the prize will be positioned to better cultivate literary expression and exploration of deserts penned by emerging and established talent from around the globe, more fully addressing the role deserts play in the human narrative. The museum knows the prize well, having generously hosted the award ceremonies since their inception, and provided the venue for workshops, panel discussions, and prize-related receptions and gatherings. The High Desert Museum is noted for engaging natural and cultural history exhibits and programming for all age groups. It is also increasingly looked to for contemporary and historical expression of creativity and imagination in performing visual and literary arts. The adoption of the prize complements the arts goals of the museum the museum is undertaking as it develops into a center for history, culture, and the arts in this vast high desert region. Before we proceed with this evening's important presentations, I want to take a moment to recognize and personally thank the Waterston Desert Writing Prize board members. Jeff Tryans, Vice President, Gail Hill, Treasurer, Louise Hawker, Secretary, Julie Kennedy Cochran, Jim Cornelius, Bart Eberwein, Ted Haynes, Les Joslin, and Dick Linford. You'll shortly be hearing from some of them. They put their shoulders to the wheel of this little nonprofit that could, and in 6 years facilitated the growth of its international reputation as a coveted literary prize, saw the caliber of submissions increase in number and quality, and the support from donors and foundations grow. What an honor it is to work alongside each of you, and what an honor it will be now to officially work alongside those representing the prize at the High Desert Museum. I can no other answer make, but thanks and ever thanks.
Hi, I'm Dick Linford, and I've been working with Ellen Waterston for close to 15 years from now. I started by taking her class, The Story You Came to Tell, and then I served on the board of directors of The Nature of Words, a 3-day annual event here in Bend featuring writers from all over the country. Now I've been on the board of directors of the Waterston Desert Writing Prize since its inception. Ellen is a writer, a poet, and visionary, but her head's not stuck in the clouds. She gets things done. She is high energy and has amazing organizational skills. The importance of these traits became painfully evident when she resigned as director of the Nature of Words after 10 years. The institution collapsed soon after. It was her baby, and it didn't survive without her. It was a hard lesson to learn. I'm very pleased that the High Desert Museum is taking the Writing Prize under its wing. This will help the prize grow and thrive in new ways. It will also help the museum to expand its literary programming. On the behalf of the directors of the Waterston Desert Writing Prize, I'm honored to have played a minor part in this exciting new venture, and I look forward to further involvement.
Thank you for the opportunity to share a few words with you during these unprecedented times. For those of you I have yet to meet, my name is Ryan Hageman, and I have the privilege of serving as the High Desert Museum's board chair. COVID, wildfires, budgets have challenged all of us personally and professionally, but the respite offered by our resilient arts and culture organizations have sustained us over the past few months. This virtual event showcasing the Waterston Desert Writing Prize is a welcome moment to celebrate the power of arts and culture and the role they play in all of our lives. As you have heard, the Waterston Prize is moving under the museum itself, and we could not be more excited to continue the tradition. The intersection of place, writing, literature, and wonder we will experience in the readings could not be more consonant with the museum's mission and purpose, and we are very grateful for the submissions we will hear about today. Please join me in congratulating the finalists and the winners, and most importantly, please enjoy the readings.
I'm Ted Haynes, a founding member of the Board of Directors of the Waterston Desert Writing Prize. The prize is an international competition, bringing exceptional writers from around the world here to Central Oregon. For some years, the board members, all writers themselves, have wanted to better serve our home community by recognizing local student writers and focusing on our own Eastern Oregon desert. This year, we inaugurated the Waterston Student Writing Prize for high school students in Central Oregon. The essays of up to 1,000 words were judged on their contribution to the understanding and appreciation of the high desert region of Oregon, on their originality, and on their clarity of expression. We worried, as you might imagine, how many submissions we would gather in the first year, and whether we would receive essays worthy of recognition. We were ecstatic and frankly relieved when we received multiple worthy submissions, and especially when we read Al Leto's beautifully written and moving essay, Badlands. We are proud to announce that Al Leto is the winner of the very first Waterston Student Writing Prize. Al's prize-winning essay explores very personal experiences with an area just east of Bend, which became a federally designated wilderness area in 2009. Al is a 2020 graduate of Redmond Proficiency Academy and currently attends the University of Oregon, majoring in early childhood education. Please welcome Al Leto.
name is Al Leito, and I'm going to be reading my submission for the Waterston Desert Writing Prize. And my essay is about the Badlands in Central Oregon. When I was a kid, my mom's favorite place to draw was the Badlands. Every Sunday, she would pack a trail bag with a water bottle, her special colored pencils, and a sketchbook to spend hours on end in the desert out east of Bend, Oregon. She was prone to spend hours alone out in the sage and the juniper, sketching whatever was in front of her. Sometimes we would huddle on rough lava rock for hours, and she would painstakingly etch the gnarled stump covered in dried lichen. When she came home, she would carry with her sketchbooks full of drawings. She'd close her bedroom door and spend the remainder of her time at home inking every square foot of dry desert plain she had seen. The Badlands are protected territory as of 2009. Before then, they were used as the dump for all the unwanted objects that Central Oregon had to offer. Parties, destructive jeeps, and bonfires flooded the scratchy wheatgrass with all the toxicity that Bend's citizens felt didn't belong in their lives. Instead, they laid waste to a desert sky and left the remnants for any lost hiker to uncover. One of those lost hikers was my mom. After its designation as a wilderness area, she drove there constantly. In between her COCC classes and caring for me and my sister, she would escape to air cleaner than water wells and mirages under the dried moss of the ancient bark of junipers. I didn't appreciate her constant absence at the time. I was about 8 and missed my mom, and loathed the fact that the only place I seemed to see her content was in the barren wasteland I occasionally was made to hike with her. I regret this resentment now. She was a mother of 2 daughters in the process of separating from her husband. She had dunes worth of baggage to unpack and few safe places to do so. She needed space. And for her, she was best able to get that in the wormwood-shaped trailheads of the Badlands Wildlife Reserve. On the rare occasions my mom managed to drag me out of the house to walk with her, I remember the broken bottles and old tires resting over in the sun from party days gone by. We would walk out for hours, out trails in the vast unknown wilderness. I would lag behind and study the litter left behind by inconsiderate passers-by. Those pieces of chipped glass, I recall, are certainly almost buried in the dust by now, as the Badlands reclaims itself. Every trail she walked, my mom drew to scale on a map. Her comprehensive map of the Badlands was her passion, and for a while, she even sold it in local markets. It always looked perfect to me, but she usually found something to fix within its pen marks. Something I couldn't fathom was worth another several hours amidst the shrubbery and desert flowers. But I've changed since I was 8. As I've grown older, my mom's passion for the aged trees has been more natural and brought me closer to understand her compassion for wildlife and longing for the great wide spaces they offer. It took me over a decade to forgive her for loving the gnarled trees more than our own urban bungalow, but hindsight is worth more than those bitter memories. Now, I realize that the Badlands may have been the only place in Central Oregon that felt safe for her to unpack as much emotion as she needed in the endless terrain yawning before her. The Badlands are an hourglass where all of her thoughts could pour and pour, and somehow space could never be filled. 10 years after her exploits, I'm not sure if I'll ever feel the same content that she does when she travels out east, but whenever she asks me to go with her, I come along. Even when we get sand grits in our shoes and the sun causes my calves to ache from slumber, I want to make up for the years I spent disgruntled while she explored a space that had only recently been made available to her through wilderness protection laws that are still in place today. Although I haven't found a natural landscape that calls me in the same way the Badlands calls my mother, I know how extremely important it is to protect these spaces from outside harm. Without their protection, I doubt my mother would have been able to explore them as uninhibited as she did. And without her fierce exploration, she would have never made the most beautiful map I've ever seen. If I am ever lucky enough to find a place that touches me in a similar way, I hope I cherish it. Maybe I can invite my mom to walk there so she can paint it. I know she'd say yes.
Greetings. My name is Louise Hawker, and I am Secretary of the Board of Directors of the Waterston Desert Writing Prize. I have the pleasure of introducing our first finalist, Leith Tennino. Leith's book proposal, titled Nooks and Crannies, Mapping the Unmappable Water Pocket Fold with Prose Vignettes, is a documentation of his outdoor encounters in this iconic location. For 15 years, Leith has been exploring Utah's water pocket fold, the sandstone that forms the spine of Capitol Reef National Park. He says, "The version of desert literacy that I hope to advance has less to do with knowing what a place is and more to do with a distinct style of engagement. That is, how to be with our not knowing, with the fact that we simply can't reduce the fold to one interpretation or understanding." Leith is a full-time freelance writer who sold his earliest magazine stories while still an undergraduate at Colorado College, where he studied philosophy and ecology. He has made some 50 backcountry trips on the Colorado Plateau, in the Mojave Desert, and across the Great Basin. His creative nonfiction, 150 pieces and counting, has appeared in Outside, Men's Journal, Orion, The Sun, High Country News, Sierra, The Progressive, and Adventure Journal. He also is the author of a forthcoming book of nature poems from Green Writers Press and 2 essay collections published by Trinity University Press. Please welcome Leith Tennino.
Hello, I'm Leith Tennino. Pleasure to be here, wherever here is at the moment. And I will take this opportunity to read an essay or maybe 2 short essays, depending on the time, out of this book of mine that came out a little under a year ago from Trinity University Press called The West Will Swallow You. It's a bunch of nature writing, travel writing about the West, and there's some definitely some desert pieces in here. So I'll start off by reading one titled Thoughts After an Owl. Yesterday, wandering at dusk in the brown hills that rise from this condo sprawl called Palm Springs, California, I spent half an hour with a long-eared owl. I tell you most sincerely that there are few creatures as stirringly strange and spookily stirring and mystically mystical as birds from the order Strigiformes. Very much the griffin of legend, these birds. That is, if the griffin of legend upped its weirdness by a factor of 15. Dinosaur feet, shaggy sheep legs, a body of feathers and fur and leaves and twigs and shattered bits of light and shadow. Of course, the face is part human, part cat, part seal, and affixed to a head that seemingly twists 360 degrees. If that's not enough, this vision, this being, this power, my, how it launches into the air and glides silently on, no, can't be possible, on 40 inches of wing. I hate to make a bold statement, hyperbole, my nemesis, my temptress, but it feels more and more that every single time I go outdoors, I'm buckling up for a borderline hallucinatory experience. The natural world just does not fail to provoke in me awe, wonder, vibes of fear, tingles of trepidation, and a kind of meditative drift state wherein all the senses knit all their sense data together to form a kind of synesthetic carpet, a magic rug on which I sail off to who knows where. Did I tell you about the desert blister beetles I met recently in nasty, gooey, sexed-up swarms? As Harvey, my old jolly antique tractor collecting neighbor from childhood in Vermont would say, shit. To spend 10 minutes with these beetles, shit, you better be buckled, maybe even helmeted. A week ago, hiking solo in that same desiccated, rugged, so-brown labyrinth of hills, that topographic maze flanking the Palm Springs shit strip of megachurches, payday loan pawn shops, car dealerships, windborne litter, bearded men masticated by a brutal economic system and subsequently regurgitated onto the street with only junk-filled shopping carts to call home. Hiking solo in them thar wacky hills, I couldn't even put my hand down to touch things, like curious rock things or plant things or stick things. The reason I couldn't touch, say, a funky stick that drew my attention and that a part of me did badly want to touch was because my hand, my flesh, was scared to do so. It was like these hands, which are so friggin' sensitive, would gather too much information, too much vital presence and place-specific truth. My feet were sheltered by leather, soled with rubber. My body needed that mediation. The hands, though, were and are naked, literally naked nonstop. It's interesting, don't you agree? We all recognize that if you show up at work buck-ass birthday suit nude, the entire experience will get awkward, intense. Pause here, consider. That's what your hands do each day. They live outside with nothing to hide behind. Bushwhacking around last week, as mentioned, was odd indeed. I was nervous to even lay a wee digit on this dry, freaky earth. Granted, there's probably one more thing at play, which is the prickliness and poisonousness of the desert, the possibility of camouflaged snakes and spiders and scorpions and whatnot. The equivalent in the mossy green Vermont of my youth would be putting your hand down on an obese slug, a rotting possum, a sodden deer carcass. And that right there loops to my initial point regarding the nearly hallucinatory quality of a simple, routine, back of the shit strip at dusk walk. Any moment, it can feel like some griffin or mystical face is about to pop out and zap you with huge yellow eyes. It can feel like a stick beneath your hand might not be a stick, rather the body of a serpent or a mass of writhing ants, or some small somebody who has a soul and a voice and will speak across the self-other boundary. It can feel like you might be encountering the divine. Once, camping on and with a blocky Colorado mountain, heart of winter, blue moonlight washing over snow, me sitting in that snow, no tent, no plan, just sitting there in the middle of the clear, cold night's vast crystalline silence. A fox pawed up within 5 feet, looked me in the eye, hung out, swung its tail, then walked away. A blue moony fox faced my face, eyed my eye, hung out, came rushing in, the sparking electric current of unadulterated perception, then walked away. Godspeed. So that's one of them. And the book just goes on and on with that kind of stuff for what it's worth. I don't claim that it's worth much. I just write the stuff and try to share it. So again, I'm glad to be here and have the opportunity to share. I'll do one more quick one. It's about the same length. This one's called The Drop. Mike and I are sitting at the edge of an anonymous prow that juts from the Grand Canyon's north rim, 70 miles past the nearest town. It's not a large campsite, maybe 10 feet square, but it's flat enough to lay pads and sleeping bags across, with a dizzying plunge on 3 sides. We've come here to do nothing, at least nothing that resembles anything. The plan is to nurse a bottle of beer until the sun goes down, then nurse a second until the moon rises, to enjoy the evening swells and lulls and silky transitions. You don't do the Grand Canyon at sunset. It does you. You stare, you blink, you breathe. You grow energized and inspired, then small and humble, then empty as the river of space flowing beneath your dangling feet against the sheer clean cliffs. So much for any plan that claims otherwise. 2 white-throated swifts arc and loop on sharp wings, flying in close, circling us, disappearing beyond the rim. A lone cloud sponges up the day's last color. All is quiet without being silent, still without being static. Mike pops his beer, and I reach for a chunk of rock weathered from the surface of the prow. Mike takes a sip. In my hand, the rock is heavy and warm. Ah, I could sit this way for eons. Or could I? The rock is pocked, fist-sized, limestone. 270 million years ago, corals and shellfish lived and died in a warm, shallow sea, their bodies sinking and piling up to become new floor. Now, that ancient ground is in my hand, and call me crazy or an animist or whatever you like, but it's speaking, not magically, but concretely, as one might expect a rock to speak. A voice tingles through my fingers, pours through my wrist, races through my elbow, my shoulder, my chest and neck and mind. I extend my arm out over the abyss, listening, obeying the command as I imagine countless humans have before. Drop, the rock chants. Drop, 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 drop. The swifts swing into view again with a whine, wings almost brushing my face, and my arm retracts, the rock's voice lost. Watching the birds carve elaborate designs upon the sky, as I feel as though I have taken flight, as though attention alone, pure, basic, staring, blinking, breathing attention, has dissolved the boundary between inner and outer, observer and observed. I want to grab Mike and shake him and share the good news, the universal human fantasy, to fly like a bird. It's possible, dude. But I can't seem to turn away or conjure language or make a gesture. For long seconds, or perhaps minutes, I wheel and swerve and sit and stare, all together and at once. When the swifts dive from sight, a thick calm settles in, and the rock in my hand pipes back up. Mike shoots me a blank, dopey look. It's clear he's also been flying, and I extend my arm. Focus, I say. Become this rock. Mike's legs are crossed, hands cradling the beer in his lap. Put yourself inside of here. Tie yourself to it. He inhales deeply, and I do the same, both of us gazing at the rock, at the immeasurable space surrounding it, at the place where the two meet. Sun presses the earth, a shining golden puddle forming in a trough on the western horizon. Overhead, the sky's lone cloud stretches and separates to reveal the night's first stars. I let go. Rather, something lets me go. And the great absence humankind has come to cherish as a symbol of beauty, wildness, and mystery rushes to fill my hand. My fingers cup a cobble of humming air, the air as light and cool as the rock was heavy and warm. Red, russet, red, gray, rust, mauve, black. The strata blur and blend. I'm plummeting, whizzing by a cave of nesting condors, a boulder perched on a ledge, a crumbling prehistoric granary, a blooming prickly pear, a bumblebee buoyant in flight. Toward and through it all, into the canyon's stifling inner chambers, its ageless heat and solitude, I fall. Whoomp! The damp sand, dark walls framing faint constellations. A massive noise washes my ears. How'd that feel? Mike nods, raises his beer. The river runs brown with sediment. So there you go. That's my offering. Too bad we can't all be together hanging out in Oregon, but it'll happen when it wants to happen. Thanks again.
Hello, I'm Gail Hill, Treasurer of the Board of the Waterston Desert Writing Prize. This evening, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our second finalist, Eli Beck. I've had the honor of being with Waterston since its inception, and each year I've been awed and inspired by the quality of the submissions. This year, Eli's entry was no exception. His writing exhibits clarity, insight, wisdom, sensitivity, and lyricism. He is the verse of the desert. And all this from an emerging writer. Since graduating from Brown University in 2018 with a degree in education studies, Eli has worked as a field instructor with wilderness therapy programs in the high deserts of the Four Corners regions of the U.S. He spends a week at a time living with teens who have struggled with their lives at home, helping them to adapt and look inside themselves. His book proposal, Rude Awakenings, will delve into his experiences in wilderness therapy. In Eli's words, it's a book about the parallel paths my students and I travel toward rootedness and sensitivity in a chaotic modern world, with all the necessary messiness and sacrifices along the way. Eli grew up in the high deserts and lives in Utah. So far, his sole published work has appeared in the Canyon Echo Journal. I'm certain this is only the beginning. Please welcome Eli Beck.
Hello, I'm Eli Beck. I'm excited and proud to be named as a finalist for the Waterston Prize. And the piece I'm about to read is a piece on what it was like to grow up in the small town of Bluff, Utah. This is on the way to slowly writing a book called Rude Awakenings about wilderness therapy in the Four Corners region. In wilderness therapy, it's always a parallel process. So this piece is a part of my journey. It's called Bluff is Not Enough, and this is the second half. Small town kids are, as a rule, perceived as innocent. Politicians bring up their small town roots to try to convince the public that they are good people. The idea of the small town kid in the big bad city is a laughable and pitiable character in our stories. Sometimes the messages were subtle. When I was away and I told the other kids where I was from, "Oh, dude, what do you do?" Sometimes it was overt, when people simply said that I seemed just, I don't know, innocent. I didn't know what to make of it at first. Now, my body tenses a little when I hear the word and its relatives. Slow, quiet, ignorant, sheltered, used in my general direction. And my face gets hot. It bothers me still, even though I know it shouldn't. And it bothered me a lot as a teenager. Because innocent people don't make a difference. They are not shakers. To be innocent meant giving up. It meant choosing to accept the small town life just because it was easier, like choosing to stay behind bars, to be given everything. It was preferable to believe that I was trapped against my will than to believe that I had given up. Back then, those were the only options I saw. The label doesn't follow me around as much anymore, because I did everything I could to keep it from sticking. Swearing, drinking, reading up on the national topic of the week so I had something to connect with people over. Now I hear, "I can't believe you're from such a small town. How did you grow up to be so normal?" I hide my pride at my accomplishment and my anger at their insinuation, shrug, and say, "Why would I not be?" The part of me that fears innocence is the same part of me that was jealous of those who cover the walls near the swinging bridge with graffiti. What I really wanted was to be out and busy making marks, guilty and free. I wanted to be one of those people who I saw in cities when I visited, who were always on the phone, exuding a sense of control, always working hard on some issue of dire importance. Too busy saving the world to enjoy the world right in front of them, or to notice the wide-eyed kid staring up at them in awe. I continued to regard Bluff with a mixture of pride and disdain through high school. Around then, the boredom started leading to more work than play. Adults would see us in "what should we do" mode, and they would find chores for us, and we obliged, feigning annoyance, but usually grateful for something to do. I picked a lot of weeds, moved a lot of rocks, shoveled a lot of dirt. I began to make the blurry and slow transition from mild nuisance to helping hand. I took some pride in this, too. After all, extraordinary people work hard, then play hard. I believed more and more that Bluff could get me to somewhere, but I still refused to believe that Bluff could actually be somewhere. One moment, in the spring of 2018, the background of disdain fell away. And it wasn't because I saw a beautiful sunset or a heron flying over the river or a rainbow stretching across the cliffs. It wasn't in Bluff at all. It was my senior year of college. I was slumped in my bed at 21 years old, 2,000 miles away, with my phone screen 6 inches from my face. I found myself flipping through a National Geographic news piece on the Bears Ears National Monument, with mentions of Bluff and people I knew and pictures of places I recognized. Bluff was suddenly part of a national spectacle. That changed everything. Bluff? Somewhere? Maybe even extraordinary? Hey everyone, I'm from there! The t-shirt of the moment, a Bears Ears National Monument shirt with local plastered over the top in red and graffiti sucks on the back. All of a sudden, roots were cool. Wings were so yesterday. And for a while, I was embarrassed. How could I have taken such an extraordinary place for granted for so many years? I realized that I didn't really know the names of anything. When you grow up somewhere, you're supposed to know the names of the land features, the plants, the hikes, especially if it's a small town. I know the globe mallow, sage, tamarisk, Russian olive. That's about it. The San Juan River, Cottonwood Wash, the cliffs over there, the cliffs over here, that one crack in the wall with the spiders, the fun side canyon, Goose Poop Island. Those names had always been enough, but not anymore. I found myself going on Google Maps binges, trying to learn some of the given, searchable names of my favorite places and some of the hikes in the area, so that I could have more to say when people asked me what I did for fun as a kid. I wanted to be on the bandwagon of hype around Bears Ears, and I wanted to be the most knowledgeable about it. But that motivation to know names did not last long. I'm curious, but looking up names on my computer, or in a book, or on an app, feels like I'm distancing myself from my playground rather than getting to know it better. It feels like a performative kind of rootedness that somehow takes the fun out of my childhood. No kid cares to know how to describe the history of the swings, driving directions to the seesaw, or the political significance of the slide in the playground. Kids know the world through touch, in a way that is intimate, self-centered, and ultimately incommunicable. That's how I know Bluff. Heavy rains and a running Cottonwood Wash didn't mean fire danger in a few weeks or months. It meant skimboarding or kayaking tomorrow. I didn't pay attention to the water politics, but I honed in on the blurry outline of the giant fish in the pond that you could see from the top of the cliffs. How did such a big fish like you end up in a place like this? Somebody should get you out. I know the hot wind. I know how the stickers get caught in my socks and shoes. I know the strength of the river and how the sand disappears from beneath my feet when I stand in the current. I know which rocks will fall when I pull on them. I know the feeling and the utility of rough, dirty calluses on the sides of my fingers from weeding. I know just how fast I can ride down Cemetery Hill on a bike without sliding out. I know which reeds in the pond make good spears. I know just how steep a slab of sandstone can be before my shoes start slipping as I climb it. I know how many days my back will hurt if I try to pick up this or that rock. I know which lizards are worth chasing, but I don't know what they're called. I know that the summer rain will only hurt for a few minutes, and my clothes will dry off faster than they got wet. I know and love all these things, and none of them are what put Bluff in the national news. One might even call them ordinary. My childlike knowledge of the place is deeper than what anybody can read in National Geographic or the New York Times. Bluff is extraordinary only in the fleeting moments when millions of people pay attention to it and have opinions about it. But Bluff can be somewhere to me without all of that. It took a brief moment of Bluff being extraordinary for me to see the difference. My t-shirt today, now that I know everything. Yeah, I wanted to get out the whole time I was there, and since I left, all I want to do is go back. I say this sentence all the time. If I'm just meeting you, I'll say it because it is the truth. And I'll say it fast, not really because I think it would be an insult to your intelligence to simply say it, but because the truth is uncomfortable. That's why it would be easier to just put it on a t-shirt. The words are an admission that despite looking exclusively for wings, I did put down roots along the way. It was easier for me to believe that I was trapped and held back by my environment than to acknowledge that I was and am trapped in the rat race, that I will never make it to extraordinary because it is a mirage, always just ahead. Bluff was never enough because it was never about me. Nothing happens because nothing is designed for my entertainment. I used to find that boring, and now I can see it as respite. Bluff will be there, maybe physically, definitely in my memories, in those lucid moments when I can remember that ordinary may be dusty, but it is very much alive. Thanks for listening.
Hello, my name is Julia Kennedy Cochran, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Waterston Desert Writing Prize. Today, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to our 2020 winner, Hannah Hindley. Hannah Hindley's winning submission, Thin Blue Dream, proposes a collection of interconnected stories that explore the Sonoran Desert's disappearing waterways, the fish that used to call them home, and the successes and complications that come with efforts to help restore depleted tributaries with city effluent. It's a strange story of ghost rivers, dead fish, and resilience in the heart of urban spaces in the desert, she says. Hindley completed her Master of Fine Arts in Creative Nonfiction at the University of Arizona in 2020. In addition to her writing talent, she is also a wilderness guide, licensed captain, environmental curriculum designer, and naturalist. Her work as a naturalist has taken her to remote wildernesses, from the arid islands in the Sea of Cortez and the fog desert of Baja California to national parks all over the West. She has written for publications including the Harvard Review, Hawkeye Magazine, Terrain, River Teeth, and Alaska Magazine. Hindley has been the writer-in-residence at Sitka Center for Art and Ecology as well. She is the recipient of the Thomas Wood Award in Journalism, the New Conrad's Prize, the Bill Waller Award for Nonfiction, and the Catherine Bakeless Nason Scholarship for the Breadloaf Environmental Writers Workshop. Hindley earned her undergraduate degrees from Harvard in English and Organismic and Evolutionary Biology. Please welcome Hannah Hindley.
Hi, everyone. I'm super honored to have been selected for the Waterston Prize, and I'm really excited about the year of research and writing that lies ahead for me now. I'm going to read two different passages from my work in progress, which is about Arizona's effluent dependent rivers, which means rivers that only flow because we shower and flush our toilets, which makes for ecosystems that are really beautiful and also really weird and complicated. I go walking with a friend up the Santa Cruz River this morning, shoes undone and laced across our shoulders. We slosh our feet in the green ooze here, where water is running its fingers down the spine of the long, dry riverbed. Water doesn't flow here often, although it used to, back when the Hohokam irrigated their crops in this valley 1,000 years before Christ, and later when Spanish horsemen arrived in their dusty saddles in the 17th century with their fruit and their cattle and their magpie eyes for buried silver and their blueprints for missions, which rose up out of the desert soil like flowers along a vine. By the mid-20th century, the river was mostly gone, slurped up by groundwater pumping and hungry cattle and pecan groves and urban expansion. When I first moved to Tucson, the river showed up blue on my Google Maps screen, but I arrived at the banks expecting water and instead found a brown wash, tangled with torn bushes and orphaned shopping carts, and the dry flutter of grocery bags left behind by the last flood. Last spring, though, the city of Tucson elected to replenish the river with treated wastewater, so that the river might bloom again with palo verde and mesquite trees, so that the pig-like javelinas might kneel at the banks to sip, so that the water from our bathtubs and toilets and sinks might percolate slowly down through the gravel and loam to replenish the thirsty aquifer under I-10. It was a success. Already, endangered fish had returned to the wet stretches of river, and mesquite seedlings, and dragonflies with bodies like ruby, and honey, and amber. My friend and I go wading, celebrating the new water, letting our toes sink into the warm slick of algae. We are talking idly about love, Clara and I, but I am thinking about Hans Christian Andersen as we splash upstream. I'm thinking about the hardbound copy of his fairy tales that my mother keeps on her shelf in her upstairs bedroom in California, the one that she grabbed, not her passport, not her medications, when she evacuated our burning hometown last year. The book is precious to her, each story a piece of her Pennsylvania childhood, the firefly twinkling backyard, the nights spent curled between my grandparents as they read aloud. I am thinking about the story my mother read to me from that same tattered book when I was small, about a mirror made by a wicked sprite, about how that mirror breaks into 100,000 pieces and goes wafting around the world, poisoning the way that people see things. In the story, one of these invisible splinters blows into the heart of a little boy, and roses grow ugly to him, and he speaks hatefully to his little friend, and he disappears into Lapland with a cruel and beautiful snow queen who whisks him away to her gem-like palace in the north. His friend travels in search of him. She speaks to the river and to the flowers, and walks under thin northern trees, their branches heavy with winter's snow, until she finds her friend, until she melts the little splinter in his chest. I am thinking about the Snow Queen because a while ago I visited an underground laboratory on the university campus where I teach. I passed through a tall windowed lobby and traveled down a staircase into a hallway that gleamed with grayish linoleum. The door to the lab had a black and white cautionary printout taped to it that read, "Warning, giant water bugs on duty." Inside, a dark-haired graduate student named Drew showed me his workstation, the metallic countertops, the pickled water bugs, a botanical map of the Sonoran Desert pinned to the wall. He knew that the water in the Santa Cruz River was clean. It was tested regularly. The water was, within reason, free from E. coli, from heavy metals. But Drew was interested in the invisible things, the things that evade testing. I am thinking about the Snow Queen, because in Drew's world, and in mine, those fairy tale mirror splinters aren't made of glass, aren't enchanted. They look like threads and orbs and shards, pink and blue and foggy white. They're made of plastic, tiny, and blown about the world like fractured glass. They peel away from fleece jackets and settle in the street dust in Tehran. They spill like little marbles out of factories and throng down current in the Rhine, and pulse apart into smaller and smaller fragments in wide ocean currents, and, in wintry Lapland woods under heavy-branched trees, they wisp groundward with the fresh-fallen snow. They settle into stomach linings and the pink cave walls of lungs. They nestle in the bellies of fish and in the reproductive tracts of people. They choke and sterilize and turn the world ugly. And for 100,000 years, a single unseen plastic shard might travel and retravel its slow ecosystem loop through gill and uterus, mushroom and shark and table salt. In his laboratory, Drew tweezed mosquito fish out of their alcohol baths. Their bodies were gray and pale, little armored mummies pulled from eddies along the banks of the Santa Cruz River. Drew laid them under the microscope and opened their bodies like the pages of a book. He snapped them open set aside their heads, their tails, pulled open their bodies, still wet with clean, clean river water. Drew rummaged through their bellies, and, under the microscope, we found them, scarcely visible, lodged deep, little indestructible fibers, cold and blue as gems. Just one more little passage from later. I'd like very much to tell you about a clear and certain future in this ever drier landscape. A future that we can net and identify as readily as a fish. Instead, I only have this, a glimpse out the window as our car returns toward Tucson from our Santa Cruz River survey. We are passing through the Tohono O'odham Nation, across land that has been cultivated for over 4,000 years, the longest in our nation. Out the window, a stretch of wet riverbed glistens. Water snakes its way between rocks, cuts soft braids into the gravelly earth. It's not effluent, the ecologist tells me. It's not city water, not allocated flow pumped out of treatment centers. It just started bubbling up on its own one day, groundwater rising where it hadn't risen in years. I turn in my seat to watch the silver blue of it. I can almost smell it. Minerals warming in the sun where they've been wetted. Oxygen rising. Are there fish there? I ask. There will be soon, the ecologist imagines. Together, we look out the window, and the river bends out of sight, a thin blue dream unspooling across the sleeping desert. Thank you.
Congratulations to all of the winners this evening, and thank you all so much for sharing the evening with us at the museum in our virtual world. I hope this evening has inspired you, and an incredible thank you to Ellen Waterston, the visionary behind this prize, and a magnificent partner to the High Desert Museum. Have a wonderful evening.